Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining the class today. My name is Stevie Denny, and I have been painting in watercolor for many years. I also paint in oil and acrylic. And today we're just going to do the snowman project that I had posted. And right now you're looking at my studio, and I have two different cameras. I'm sitting at my PC right now, which is across the room from my table. So I'm going to switch cameras, and then you won't see my face, but instead you'll see me over at my table. You'll see my setup and the paper. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And then right now I will go ahead and switch cameras. Okay. Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes,
Jean, could you say something again?
yes, I can hear you.
Oh, I don't think I switched microphones. Hold on. Because you were across the room. That makes me think I didn't do the right microphone.
It sounded good, but yeah, definitely it's your other mic, I think.
Let me see this.
I can hear you.
Okay, can you hear me better now?
I can hear you.
Krista, can you tell a difference?
Not really, but it sounds good. We can hear you.
Yeah, it works fine.
Yeah, you're coming in good.
Okay, all right. I had sent out, Jean, did you, oh, I can see, Jean, that you, or no, that's me. Jean, did you do the line drawing of the snowman?
Yes, it's all done.
Oh, okay, that's all ready to go.
Yep.
And for the benefit of the recording, because people might be watching this later, I first drew the snowman with pencil, and I just use like a big pencil to do that. And so I drew it first with my pencil, and then I inked it in with one of my Micron pens. And I use Micron, this is permanent ink. And since we're going to put watercolor on the paper, I have to make sure to use a pen that's not going to bleed when I put water on. So the Micron is a great pen for that. I've used these for a long time. And this is a Micron 05, which is a good size. 3 or 5 is good. But you won't have problems with the bleeding if you use that kind of a pen. I think I put Sharpie on the supply list because they're a little less expensive. And if you're just getting started, I know it costs a lot to handle all the supplies. And a Sharpie will work fine too. That's also waterproof. Your ink is not going to bleed with that. So I wanted to show you two different versions of this that I did. The only thing that's different is the background. And the picture that I posted online, the background is a cobalt blue. And if you like that, great, you can use that. But I was playing around one day and thought, well, what would it look like if I used a darker blue? This is ultramarine blue. And I don't know, I like both of them. It's really just a personal preference. You could put any blue in there, really. I kind of like the cobalt blue better, although I tried to put a little snow on by flicking on some gouache, some watered down gouache paint. And of course, the snow shows up better. I don't know if you can see it in the camera, but the snow shows up better with the darker paint. So if that's real important to you, you might want to use the darker. I think today I'm going to go ahead and use the cobalt blue again, but maybe just use a little bit more of the color. This was pretty watered down. So if you're ready to get started, you ready to get started, Jean?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm going to keep this here so you can look at it as we go. Oh, one other thing about my paper. I wanted to show you the kind of paper I'm using because I use this quite a bit. For my bigger watercolor paintings, I use Arches painting Arches paper, 140 pound, which is really good paper. But for my everyday sketches, I found this paper online that I like, and it's called Tumarata. I believe that's a Japanese brand, and I get it on Amazon. this size is 7 by 10 inches. So I can get 2 5x7 sketches out of one sheet of paper. So it comes in a pad of 16 sheets, but that means I can get 32 paintings out of this. So I just wanted to share that with you. It is a lot less expensive than Arches paper, so for practice, or for small sketches, it's great. So just wanted to share that. And we'll go ahead and get started. I'm gonna put these kind of like this. I don't think that'll be in my way. I'm gonna move my little decoration out of the way. So you'll be able to see both of them. And the brushes I'm going to use today will be, these are all synthetic hair brushes. These are Princeton brushes. I really like the Princeton brand, and you can buy these at Michaels or online. They're reasonably priced. Roughly, they're about $10 each, depending on the size of the brush. And they sell them in sets too, also. But I'm going to use, this is a 1/2 inch flat brush, and this is my number 8 round. And then I also will use some kind of a liner brush or a small brush. This is a number 1. This is pretty small, a number 1 Princeton. So I have some other Princeton brushes here. A liner would work just as well, but primarily I'm going to be using these 2 brushes. And I did this painting a couple of times. The first time I did it, I painted the background last. And that was okay. But what happened when I painted the background last is some of the red color from his hat started to bleed into the blue. So then the next time I painted it, I did the background first. And I think that worked out a lot better. So I think we'll do that today. But even before we do the background, I want to point out his eyes and the mouth and the little buttons on his breast. And I painted those in with black. Well, I don't have black watercolor, but I mixed the black and I used watercolor paint to paint those in. But it might be just as easy to do them, to color them in with your Sharpie or your Micron pen. And I think I'm going to do that today. It just saves time and it keeps the paint from bleeding. This won't bleed. Excuse me. So I'm going to go ahead and do this first. Just fill in the mouth, the eyes. Excuse me. And the little buttons. The other thing you could do, I painted his little arms with watercolor paint as well. But if you'd rather do that with the black ink, you could do that too. I think I'm going to go ahead and paint those just with watercolor paint so you can watch me do that. But I won't do that until after we do the background. Okay, so once you have the eyes, the mouth, and the buttons colored in, then you can go ahead and start wetting your background to put in the sky behind him. And I want to show you something before I do that. And this has to do with keeping the whole surface wet because this is a pretty big area. And I'm using a little 1/2 inch brush. And if I start applying the color up here, I could end up with a hard line where the color stops before I pick up more water. I'll show you what I mean. So hopefully you can see my palette here. This is my cobalt blue. I'm just pulling out some cobalt blue. And this is dry paper. So I want to, and I'm doing that purposely because I want you to see what happens if I don't keep the edges wet. And by the edge, I mean this edge here where the paint stops. I'm going to wet part of that edge. I'm rinsing my brush off. part of it, I'm gonna just leave like that. The other part, I'm rinsing off my brush and I just have water on my brush now. And I'm just gonna tickle the edge of that color with my wet brush. And see how that color flows? And I just pull that out, keep rinsing my brush and pull that out. And that's a soft edge. What happens if you don't do that, and if you don't do it fairly quickly, is you'll get a hard edge like this. And it's pretty hard to get rid of. And then if you did the sky like that, you'd end up with a bunch of hard edges. So instead, now you can wet the sky first, which I will do. But you still have that problem because, well, I live here in Arizona and it just doesn't stay wet that long. So I can get down here to where the water stops. And then I have to do something. I have to pick up more water or add more paint. But I'm using the clear water, just rinsing my brush, using that clear water to pull that color out and keep that soft edge. See what I mean? Now I did that pretty fast and it kind of looks like a stormy sky. We'll spend more time on it on the project, but I just wanted you to see that. Does that make sense, Jean?
Yes,
Okay. All right, so I'm going to set that aside. And I take Bounty paper towels, the half sheets, and then I cut them in half again. So I have these little paper towels handy and I just keep one just in case I need it. And the other thing I do is this is just an enamel tray, but I just have this is a microfiber towel that I cut up. And that's where once I dip my brush in the water, I just dab it on that microfiber towel. So right now, I'm going to go ahead and start at the top of the page. And I'm kind of using an X stroke like this. So I'm using the whole flat of the brush to put that water on. If you only have a round brush, you can do this too. And if you only have a round brush, I'll show you how you would do that. You use the whole brush. You would just don't use the tip. You lay the whole brush down, use the belly of the brush to do that. And you might want to use your round brush as you get into the tighter areas around the snowman's hat. So I'll go back to this other brush. So I'm going to wet it. Have to go around his little carrot nose. Don't cover that up with the sky. It doesn't matter whether or not I cover his little arms because they're going to be darker. So I'm just going to do that much. So I did this part. I got in around the ball on his hat. I got about that far. And I'm going to start at the top. And I'm just, again, you kind of using X strokes to make that sky. Now it's staying pretty wet, so I don't have to worry yet about my hard edges on my sky. I'll just go right on down over that arm, his twiggy arm. I want to be careful as I get up next to his hat. So, and around the little carrot nose. I don't want to get the blue paint on that. Pick up a little more paint. And you have to be thinking about a few things. I want to get in there around the hat and do that, but I'm concerned that I've got a hard edge here and I've got to take care of that first. When you see your paint going to a hard edge, you've got to take care of it because in a few seconds, you won't be able to get rid of that hard edge. Same thing over here. I'm just using my clear water just to make sure that I still have that soft edge. I'm going to go on and before I get into that tight area around his hat, I'm just going to finish this out. And I don't think this part is wet, but it's not very big. So I'm just going to work carefully in here around his scarf and that mountain in the distance. hill, I guess, not a mountain. And I can go back up in here because this is still pretty wet. And I can add more color if I want to. If it had started to dry, I'd have to wait until it dried completely to do that. Finishing out over on this side. Okay, so now I'm gonna switch to my number 8 round brush because I can get in that tighter area with it. And I'm just going to carefully go around the little ball on the end of his hat and around his scarf. Rinse my brush and just kind of work that paint out a little bit. And I didn't tape this down, so you can see that the paint is puddling on each side of my paper, starting to buckle a little bit. And I'll show you how you fix that. I'm taking a dry brush, there's no water on this at all. And I just run it right along the edge of the paper. Wipe it off on a paper towel. Oops. And then along this side as well, that'll pick up that extra puddle of paint. Fix that. There, that's pretty good. And I have another one up here. See if I can get this brush dry enough to pick it up. See how I'm just dabbing to pick up that paint? I don't know what that is. Just a piece of paint, I guess. Okay, that looks pretty good. Okay, so that's the sky. Jean, how are you doing?
Good.
Ready to move on?
Yep.
Okay, so this is still pretty wet in here. And I don't want to go in and do anything to the snowman yet because we'll start bleeding into the sky. So then I look around the painting and say, well, what else could I be working on right now? So I think what is safe to do is we could work on the little hills here in the front. And it's all snow. And if you look at my original painting, all I did was put in some shadows. This is pretty easy. I like painting snow, it's not a lot of work. Just put in, I'm gonna drop in some water, just randomly. And then you just put in some snow shadows. And your shadows go, of course, if you want to indicate that there's, the hill is undulating, you put them in that way. And then behind these little hills here, there would also be shadows behind your hills. So right now, what I'm gonna do is go in, just randomly, I'm gonna put in some water. On this front hill, don't touch the back hill yet because we'd be running into that blue paint, that wet blue paint. So on the front hill, I just randomly put in some water and then I'm going around with just my wet brush around those little hills in the front. I just turned it upside down because it's easier to do. And you can do a little down in the very front too. And then I'll just pick up more of that cobalt blue paint and just start here and there, just it's kind of just use your imagination really as to where the indentations would be in the snow. And then I'm going to turn my paper around again with just a little bit of the blue paint on my brush to make the shadows behind those little hills in the front. And I don't mind that there's a lot of blue behind those little grasses because later on I'm going to put some snow on them and that'll help to make it show up better. And I'll add a little bit down here as well. There, okay. I can see that my sky is still really wet, so I don't want to get back up there yet. If you get too much paint or in a spot that you don't like, just kind of dab it. And that color is light enough, should be light enough that you can just pick it up. We could work on the little mouse right now because he's not really close to anything that's too wet. And for the mouse, I used, if you have any kind of a brown burnt sienna, I don't have burnt sienna, but I use a color called quinacridone burnt orange, and that's this color here. It's very much like burnt sienna. It's just a little more orange than burnt sienna. I'm going to use that color for the mouse, but first I'm gonna wet him before I apply the color. And the reason I do that is if I wet him first before I put the color on, I can get some form to his body by having the darker areas around the outside, and getting the lighter areas in certain spots. So what I'm gonna do is wet his little body here. You just do it all over. And then I'll take some of my Quin burnt orange, or you can use your brown or burnt sienna, and go along the edges. Remember, that's wet, so that paint's gonna move. Mine was really wet. I think on this little drawing, I forgot one of his legs. I'll have to go back in and draw that in later. Right here at his neck, my color is really moving a lot, so what I was doing was wiping the water off my brush. I'm just gonna use more paint and less water, but I wanted to get a little more color right on his neck and under his mouth, because his head or his jaw would turn right there. This is kind of interesting. I'm gonna move this paint around a little bit. I want to keep that white highlight kind of in the middle. And on your drawing, you should have a leg here. I forgot to draw that line in. I'll have to do that later. So there should be another leg right there. And what I did on this drawing, on this painting, was I painted it dark here in front of the leg, back here, and going around the outside of those lines with the color. Now I'll go back up. I don't want too much water on my brush, but I'll go back up to his head here and go around the outside. I don't want to go around the outside at the top of his head though, because that's where the light there would be the most light. Now I'm going to get up here around his ear. And then on his other ear, I just dropped in some color. So I'm just trying to create that roundness on his head. That's pretty good. And then on his tail, you might need a smaller brush. I'm going to try it with my number 8, but I'm going to use just the tip of the brush. I dipped it in a little bit of water, not too much water. And I'm first going to just put water on his tail. And I was being careful not to get outside the lines of that tail. Now, when I drop in the color, I'm going to drop it in at the top. And just leave it lighter in the middle, so it looks like there's a form change there. Just fixing his head a little bit there. And if you get outside the lines and you want to pick up some paint, I keep right here, I got outside the lines a bit. I just take my wet brush, no color on it, go over it a little bit, and then I take my paper towel and just dab it down. And that's to pick up the extra moisture so it doesn't bleed all over the place. Same here on his tail. quinacridone colors are hard to pick up because they're very permanent, but I might be able to pick a little of it up. That looks pretty good. His little nose is, well, I made it pink. And his ear is pink too, if you notice here. I put some little pink on for the ear. And what I used for that was alizarin crimson. This is my alizarin crimson here, and you only need a tiny, tiny bit and really thinned out with water because it's a really strong color. I'm just going to put a little with the tip of my brush on his nose. I'm trying to be careful not to put too much paint on. And then on the inside of that line on his ear, now that's a lot of color. So I rinsed my brush and I'm just going to spread around that color that I put on. I didn't want it to be too dark. And watercolor dries or lightens as it dries. So it'll lighten somewhat. But I think that's pretty good for now. And I had forgotten to put, I was going to put that little eye in with my micron pen. And I forgot to do that, but I have to wait until that's really dry. So I'll have to go back later and do that. And then for the little bit of cheese that the mouse has, I just used yellow. And the yellow that I used was, this is Hansa Yellow Medium. Depending on what palette you're using and what colors you have, any yellow will work. Even raw sienna would work too. But I just used, all I did was use yellow and I really watered it down so there was hardly any color. That's pretty bright. And I just tried to get around those little holes in the cheese. I don't know how well I did at that. And then I went back in with some of my quinacridone burnt orange and darkened a little bit of it. And that's it for the cheese. That's real easy to do. And when you're painting and you want to know if your water or your paper is dry, touch the paper with the back of your finger. And if it feels cool, it's still wet. I can really see, even though there's no sheen on this anymore, I can see that this is still wet. So I'm a little hesitant to go back up and do very much to the snowman yet. What I might do, well, what we can do, we can work on the, I think it's dry enough that we can work on the shadows on the snow up here on this further mountain. So I'm just taking a little bit of water, dabbing it around like we did on the other one, and pick up a little bit of my cobalt blue. Doesn't need too much. That's pretty much it. Okay, that's it for the snow for now. Let me see. If you have a hair dryer or you feel your own paper and see how wet it is. If you have a hair dryer or a heat gun, you might take a minute to go dry that off. I have a heat gun. I'm gonna walk over to another table here in my studio and dry this off. It'll just take a minute. But I think that would be a good thing to do before we move on. So I'll be right back.
Me too.
Okay. Jean, are you there?
Yeah. I came over to the air conditioner to blow dry it.
I'm sorry,
I'm good.
I couldn't hear that, Jean.
You could hear it?
No, I couldn't hear you.
Oh, I went over to the air conditioner to blow dry it. I have cold air instead of warm air.
Is it dry enough?
Yeah.
Okay, good. And if anyone wonders why I'm talking to Jean, it's because she's the only person here at the moment. Okay, so we're ready to go and we can start working on the snowman now. And I think we should start with the hat. No, we're going to start with the shadows. I ran into this problem before. When I did the first snowman, this one, I wanted to get more shadows on the hat. But after I put the red paint on, that red paint bleeds so much, I really couldn't do that. So on this one, I forgot to do it on here too, but this time I'm remembering that if I want to get shadows on the hat, I need to do that before I put the red paint on. We're going to actually put shadows on the whole snowman. And you can see on here what I did. I mixed up, kind of a purplish color for the shadows. And because of the roundness of the snowman, you want to show that form. So that's the idea around doing the shadows. So I did it around, each part of the snowballs. And then a little bit under his scarf. That's hard to see, but around the scarf a little bit. And then up on around his head and under the scarf here. But this time we're also going to put shadow on his hat and on his scarf to give a little bit more dimension to it and more form to that shape. So that's what we'll do now. And I might switch, if you have a smaller round brush, I thought I had a number 6 here. Let's see. You could use an 8. Here's my 6. I'm going to use a 6. This is just a little bit smaller than the 8, size 8 brush. And I think maybe for getting in these areas, this might be good. Now, remember what I said earlier about the hard and soft edges. These shadows are all soft edges. And I saw a painting posted online of a snowman, and they had done the shadows, but they had really hard edges. And a formed shadow does not have hard edges. So it's really not believable if you do that. You've got to get those soft edges in there. So first, well, let's mix up a color first, and I'm going to stick with my cobalt blue. Whatever blue you were using for the sky and the snow, use that blue just to keep consistent color throughout your painting. So I'm going to mix up some of that and then pick up a tiny bit of that alizarin crimson that I used for the ear and the nose on the mouse. And that'll make a nice purple. And the other thing is you don't want to go too dark. So if you need to add more water to it, just keep doing that as you go. So before we start with the color, I'm going to wet the areas that I'm going to paint. Let's start with that big snowball at the bottom of the snowman. So all I'm going to do is do my water around the edges. And notice how I'm laying down that whole brush. I'm using the belly of the brush to apply that water all the way around. But I'm leaving the center white and dry. Now I can pick up some of my purple color and drop that in. And because that color, or because the paper is already wet, that color starts to bleed. The color always goes where the water is. So this looks pretty good, but I'm just going to rinse my brush and again use the whole belly of the brush to make that water spread, or make the color spread a little bit more. Like this. And I don't have any hard edges on there, so that looks pretty good. And And if you find that you have too much water sitting on your paper in some area, wipe your brush off. And just with a dry brush, try to pick up some of that water. I didn't really have too much, I just wanted to demonstrate that. Okay, so I'm gonna move on to the next ball of the snowman. Going again, same process, going around the edges. And I'll go around the outer edges first. Don't worry about the arms right now, just go right over it. And under the scarf, get at the bottom edge of this upper snowball as well, get that. And I go around the scarf a little bit. And then I start adding my color, my shadow color. I don't worry about those arms because they're going to be covered. And this paint is so thin, it's not going to matter. And if you think you got too much color in there and not enough of the round form is showing, just wipe your brush off, rinse your brush, wipe it off, and just pick up a little color. I need to add a little more shadow here. Now I'm looking back at this bottom snowball and I thought I was getting a hard edge there. So I went back, I rinsed my brush, went back with a wet brush and just softened out that edge. Same up here, I can see that happening. Starting to get a hard edge. So I just rinse my brush, wipe it off, and then wipe out some of that color. Okay. How are you doing, Jean?
I'm doing good.
Are you caught up?
Yep,
Okay. I'm mixing up a little more of the shadow color. I ran out. Okay. So now we'll go on to the snowman's face. And don't forget to go around that carrot nose. Don't wet that yet. So under the hat, around the sides of his face, above his little scarf. And add some shadow color. Just watch for hard edges and go back and get rid of them if you have to. And you can see how that gives roundness to this form when you do that. While we've got the shadow color, we could also work on the little ball on his hat. And what I'm going to do on there is wet the bottom of the ball so that the top of the ball would be brighter. Like it's, like the light is hitting it. I don't want it too dark. Something like that. Now on his hat, I think that background is dry, so I can get up there with my shadow color. I want to get some shadow on the hat. And it's the same process. I'm going to wet, I want to keep the very top of the hat white, but I'm wetting the edges of that hat on each side. Not this part that hangs down, but right in front of it. And then I think along this bottom as well. And I want to take just a little bit of that purple color. And go along those edges. This one I want to bleed out just a bit. There. That tends to give it more of a round look. And I left that very top white where the light would be hitting it. Then on the side of, or the part of the cap that hangs down, I'm going to do the same thing. Just going to go along each edge. And then right here where it turns, where it starts to hang down. There we go. Now we'll need to let that dry before we go back in and put the red stripes on the hat, but we can work on the scarf doing the same thing. So I'm going to go take my clear, just my water on my brush, go along the edges, top and bottom edges. Oops, I didn't want to get into this part that's the end of the scarf that's hanging down. That's a separate piece. Around the little knot in it. Let's do that first. Let's go ahead and do the top and the bottom of the scarf. Around the edges of that knot in the scarf. There's a little part here that turns over on this left side. It's a tiny area, but that's where the scarf turns over. I'm just putting some shadow in there. And I don't think we need to do that on the parts of the scarf that hang down. So we'll let that dry. You caught up, Jean?
Yes,
Okay. So to give that just a little bit of time to dry before I do the nose, we could work on the arms, on the snowman's arms. And that was where I picked up my smaller brush. This is a number 1. This is pretty small. I think I have a 2. Yeah, I'm going to use my 2. You could use a liner brush to do this too. And I don't have black on my palette, but what I like to do for black is take some of my quinacridone burnt orange and I mix it with ultramarine blue. Hopefully you can see this. Mix it with my ultramarine blue, more blue than orange. And that really makes a nice dark blackish looking color. And if you want to have a little bit of roundness to the bigger part of each arm, rinse your brush off and have just water on it. And first lay down just some water inside the arm. I would do one at a time. And then try to get with your small brush, go along the bottom of that arm. And what happens is the paint starts to bleed up, but it's lighter at the top. So it looks like it's getting more light at the top, on the top of the arm. And then you could just leave, if you used your Sharpie or Micron pen to make the rest of the arm, you could just leave it, or I'm going to go back over it with my paint. Like that. There's a little bit of bleeding right here, but I don't really care. I'm just going to leave that. Then I'm going to do the same thing with the other arm. So this is why I didn't really care if the sky was put over the arm. Doesn't matter now. And I'll go along the bottom of this one. This is such a small detail that it really doesn't matter if you get it just perfect, but I just wanted to show you that technique. Okay. And these arms are made of tree branches, so it's kind of hard to go wrong on the if they're not perfect, well, so be it. So I think I need a little more color here on this one. I have too much water on my brush. Yeah. Just to, as it's drying, it lightened up a bit and I want it just a little darker. And I think I'll go ahead and do his carrot nose. And I did that the same way that I just explained the arms. So what I would do first is use clear water to just wet the nose. Then pick up some orange paint. In this case, I have, this is a color called benzimita orange. It's very much like cadmium orange. So whatever orange you might have would work. And I'm going to go along as best I can along the bottom of that nose. It just kind of bled out so quickly I couldn't control it. But it's a small detail, so I'm not going to worry about it. And that's it for the, now we're gonna, that's it for the nose, but we're going to work on his cap now. And just be careful if his nose is, or the arms are still wet, depending on whether you're right or left-handed, make sure not to get your hand in that wet paint and smear it. So just be aware of that. And I want to talk about the scarf and the hat for a minute. This is something you need to think about before you put down any paint. I wanted to make sure that the red stripes were at the end of the scarf. So before I painted it, I went back and I started here with red, white, red, white, red, white, to know, I just wanted to know what it would end up with. I don't want to end up where I have an extra stripe that would be white, because that's not what I wanted. I hope you can follow what I'm saying. Same here, I wanted red on the outside, so red, white, and that looks pretty good against that red there. And then I had a red on the knot for the scarf, I put the red in the middle. And then same here, I wanted the red at the bottom, red, white, that's a big stripe, red, white, red. I think the way I worked this out was, on the other one, I may have had an extra stripe in here, but because I wanted the red, white, this was how it came out. So I hope you can follow what I'm trying to say. Just plan that out before you get in there with your brush and realize, oh, I've got an extra stripe, and what do I do with that? So this worked out pretty well. And then up here, I wanted red on the outside, so red, white, red, white, red, white, red. That worked out okay. I think this was just a happy accident that I drew it that way. And then here, I wanted the white at the top, so you have to remember, you know, then your red stripe goes here. And then here, I wanted the red right next to that little pom-pom on his hat, so I wanted to make sure that was there. So I started here, red, white, and that worked out pretty well. So you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to use this same brush. This is my number 2. And the color I used is cadmium red. Any bright red will do. I wouldn't want to use the alizarin crimson because that's too deep. I really wanted this to be nice and bright. So I'm using, this is cadmium red light. And these are my extra colors. I just got my finger in. This is my regular palette that I paint with, and it holds 18 colors, but I always have some extra colors that don't fit depending on what I'm painting. So this is my extra little palette of colors that I keep with it. So I don't want to thin out this paint too much, just enough to be able to apply it to the snowman. But I'm gonna do my same process here just to make sure I drew it right. Red, white, red, white, red, white, red. Yeah, that's going to work. So I'll start here. This is the same process you use if you're doing a border around your painting that's a checkered border. So you don't have 2 colors ending up right next to each other, 2 of the same color. Better to learn that before you put the paint down, which gives you time to fix it before you paint it. Then just pay attention when you're painting so you don't paint two squares right next to each other with the same color. Okay, let's get that right up next to the knot and getting that red in there. So here, when I do this part of the scarf to the right, I would not want red up against that if I don't have to. So that would be white, red, white, red. That works out right. So I can have red on the outside here as well. There we go. And if it didn't work out right and you thought, oh my gosh, you know, I didn't draw this right and now I want to do another red one. If you wanted to do that, you could always draw an extra line in there and get something in. But thankfully mine worked out okay. And I'll do this. This is the knot of the scarf. Still able to keep the red, white, red, white, red, white. And then for the part of the scarf that goes down here, again, I want the red at the bottom. So I'm going to start here. Red, white, red, white, red, white, red. That looks a little different from my other images, but that's okay. I wanted to know that before I do it. So red, white, red, white, red, white, red. Do red up here. And this is a big square, but I'm just gonna go with that. So I don't lose my count. White, red, white, red. Okay, so that's white. Red here. I could even make that a little bigger and no one would notice. And then red at the end. My paint's getting a little dry. And cadmium red light is a funny color. As it dries, when you come back to look at it the next day, it might look a lot lighter than it does today. If it does, then just go back and do another layer of color. It tends to really lighten. Okay, so that's it for his scarf. Now we're gonna do the same process on his hat. And I'm gonna, even though I painted this before, I'm gonna count it again. Red, white, red, white, red, white, red, white, red. Okay, so I can start on the outside with red. This is a nice little project because you learn about soft color and how to keep soft edges. But it's also easy enough for an inexperienced painter or a beginner just to, you know, to get a really nice little project. Here's the one on the left side. Okay, then on to the top of his hat. I know I want the top of it to be white. So red, so white, red, white, red, white. That works out well. So the red is the second one up. I think I have my computer glasses on. And I can't see as well as I should. Okay, there. And then onto the bottom part of his little hat. Next to the white ball, there's a little tiny space there that I want red. So red, white, red, white, red. So the stripe right next to the other part of the hat is red. And then down right next to the little pom-pom is red. And I can see that I got a hard edge on his face. I don't know that, it's all dry, so I don't know that I can soften it out any, but I'm gonna try just with a wet brush. But I have to be careful that I don't pick up that red color and get it all over. It's not a big deal, but if you see any hard edges and want to get rid of them, just go over it with a wet brush and hopefully that'll do it. That's another thing I like about this paper, this Tumarata paper. It's pretty forgiving. Some papers you wouldn't be able to lift anything off it. And every paper is different, but this is pretty good for that. I'm gonna go back with that black paint that I had mixed up and just put in the little eye on the mouse. I'd forgotten to do that. How are you coming along, Jean?
I've got it all done.
Okay. And I didn't do this on my other paintings, but I'm gonna try to see if I can get a shadow. You may or may not want to do this, but I'm gonna try to do a little shadow. I have a little bit of shadow color left on the very bottom of the nose.
My nose is still wet.
Oh, that's too much. Yeah, what about your nose, Jean?
It's still wet.
Oh, okay, then don't touch it if it's still wet. Yeah, that's okay. It's such a small area, it's hard to do. Okay, Jean, do you have any gouache or anything like that?
I do, but I'd have to dig for it.
Oh, okay. What about, I don't know what you're using today. Do you have any kind of like Chinese, what do they call it? Chinese white paint?
Chinese white.
Yeah, white watercolor.
Yeah. Do
Well,
I try to use that for snowflakes?
well, you could do this later. You could just watch me. I didn't want to tell anybody to buy it for this one little thing. But if you already have it, it's a nice thing to do. And I'll show you, I use wash. And I use for anybody who's watching this and doesn't know what gouache is, it's opaque watercolor. And this is Winsor Newton Designer's Gouache. And I just use the white because you can also mix it with watercolors. But right now I'm just going to use it as white. And what I want to use it for is to make some snow on the painting. And I need to get a little paper towel or a paper plate. Here. I made a mess the other day. I had it everywhere when I was spattering, but I could put this right on my palette, but it's kind of a pain in the neck to clean up. You can't just leave it there. So I put it on a paper plate. And you don't need much, just a little bit. And just put that away. And then I want to add some water to it, of course. I'm gonna need a larger brush for spattering. And if you don't want to get the spatter all over the place, move everything out of the way. And I might lay around a few paper towels. I didn't do that the other day and I had to clean off my whole board. So I'll just do this. I'm gonna put my paper towel over here. Just set it on my palette. Okay, so I'm gonna add a little bit of water to it. I need to get it wet enough to be able to spatter. And if you've done spattering before, you know it has to be pretty liquid. I think this brush is gonna be too thick. I don't know, I'll try it. I'll try it and see. I could use a really thin liner brush to do the spattering, but the spatter will be very small. If you want that, if that's what you want, that would be fine. But I'm gonna try this number 4 brush and see what that's like. So I get a lot of water on my brush, pick up some of the real thin gouache, and I'll just give it a try here. I get down pretty close to the paper to do this. Oh, I like this. I like the size of it. Oops. The nice thing about gouaches is removable. I'll have to fix that later. So if you get a big blob like I did, you can go back with a wet brush and get that off. So however much snow you want in your painting, that's how you do it. And if you see things that you don't like, I think this is okay, but here's a big one. You can go back with a wet brush and a paper towel and kind of dab it. See how that knocks it back? Same here. You might have to work at it for a minute, but you can get those smaller. And then where I drop that big blob, I can go back and just kind of wipe that out. The other thing I could do would be to put more snow there. Some artists will make snow in the background while the background is still wet, and all they do is just spatter water onto the background. That won't do anything here because this is dry. You can do that, but it can get out of control pretty easily. If you want to do that, I'd suggest practicing it on a separate piece of paper first. And now the only thing I want to do is go back in with a little bit of my cobalt blue, very thin, not too much, and right around the snowman where I didn't get the sky in there. It doesn't have to match perfectly, but just to get a little color in there in the different little spots. I'm not gonna, well, I guess I could do it up here too, around the hat. And just go over it to blend it out so it doesn't look like an outline. Yeah, he's looking pretty good. Let's see, I think that's everything, but I wanted to show you something that you could do with this, not with this particular painting. Oh, I wanted to put some snow on the bushes. I'll do that before I tell you what else I wanted to tell you. So this same gouache, this thin gouache, you could use to make it look like there's a little bit of snow on these bushes, kind of just dab it around. Like, you know how sometimes it gets right on the little grasses and then it's in between them. Just dab it around. And if you don't have gouache, you can do this later. It's just a nice little touch. Now, the other, I didn't have time to do another version of this, but I thought about it. But at least I want to show you what else you could do. Let's say that you wanted to use this to make the front of a Christmas card or some kind of a Christmas greeting. I have some things here. I really like lettering, and I've done calligraphy for 40 years. formal calligraphy, but this kind of lettering is very informal. And there's a lady named Lindsay Ostrom who is a master at this kind of lettering. And she has a lot of free information on Facebook. Her group on Facebook is called Creative Hand Lettering with Lindsay, I believe. And she's got a website. Her website is creatorofcuteness.com. But I love this book. I've known Lindsay for many, many years because she used to have a store in Southern California that I would go to. But now she does all this online. But these are all her alphabets that she has done. She's just a master at lettering and really creative kinds of lettering. If you like to do that sort of thing in some of your sketches. So, you know, I just wanted to give a shout out to her because I've learned a lot from her. But there are some simple things you can do that add a lot to your work. And I was looking to see if I could find the one I was thinking of, and I can't, of course. This is nice. If I had more time, I would do that, but what I really like about what she does is, let's get rid of that wash. She's very good at fitting, like here. She fits the lettering into whatever space there is, and she has free lessons online on her Facebook page, and she's on YouTube as well. And I encourage you, if you like lettering, to watch her. Here's a good example. And it's kind of hard to read, but I just know how she does it. She would have drawn the outline, the lines on the outside, and then she fits the lettering into it. And you can, here, she does this with this drawing of her little girl. And here she's demonstrating how she does that. And some of the words are squeezed together, some are further apart, but that's how she does that. And she does all of this without really planning it. She just draws the lines and then does it. But I encourage you to look at her work. It's really nice. But what I like to do is take a version of that. And last night I was working up some different things. Let's say that you wanted to make a greeting on this piece. You could not put these lines in, just that could be your space for lettering. Let's say this is the space for lettering. You'd have all that white space. And then I didn't color them in, but just some simple things. Like here's one that said, Merry Christmas. I was just fitting it to the size of the paper. So you could do something like that. And on this one, you can see I squeezed together the letters. And then at the end I had space. So, you know, she showed us how to add a little something there. I added a heart. And you could make a banner out of this. What I like to do is I use those letters or the lines as guides. And then once I go back with my Micron pen and ink over them, and then I erase all the pencil, I can erase those guidelines as well. Or you could make a banner out of it by giving it a little tail. And she shows how to do that as well. But just to give you the idea, you could make a little banner. And that would be a nice little Christmas greeting. And I did some others here. One is Let It Snow. That was really simple with her. I think she calls these Tinker Toy letters, or another Merry Christmas, a smaller one like that. And then what I do, I don't use watercolor. It would be too hard to control, but instead I've got these pens. And these are, I think I got them online. Zig is the brand. And it's water-based ink. So it's like watercolor, but it's easier to control because it has a thin tip and then a broad tip. And I use the thin tip. So for example, if I wanted to do, let's say the Merry Christmas one, I'll move all this. Now, one thing I would do is, after the ink dries, I can erase the guidelines, but one thing I would do is just lightly erase the Merry Christmas, the letters, so that they're not so, so that the pencil is not so prominent. Just so I can see the ghost of it. So I know where I'm going with this.
Mhm.
And then I just take my pen. Oops, that's the wrong end. That's the thick end. You could try the thick end, but I'm gonna use the thin
Chicken
end.
noodle soup in the cupboard. Will you heat that for me? I'll drink it.
And just go over it. And it makes, you know, really cute lettering.
No. Kitchen.
And also another thing that she does is she doesn't worry about capital and lowercase. Whatever type of letters she wants to put in there, she puts in. For example, I don't particularly like capital E's. I don't think they're that attractive. So I use a lowercase e, and nobody's going to notice. And here I'm using a lowercase a because I really like how they look. And here with this S, I'm going to curve it over and put a little heart there. There you go. So if you wanted to leave out these lines at the bottom of your sketch and instead leave room for some kind of a greeting, you could do that. And this paper that I used it's called, I like it because it's a dot grid. Rhodia paper. I really like this. I think there's a lot of brands that sell it online. And at Michaels as well. But it's grid paper that's dotted. And I like that paper a lot because it just helps me to line things up. But generally, I'll work out a design on a piece of paper like this, fit it in to whatever I'm doing, figure out how much room I need, and then I'll take a pencil and mark. A lot of it I freehand, but I'll mark like on the paper, where's it going to start and where's it going to end? Like that. Here I marked the middle because I just wanted to know where the middle was. I knew that there's a lot more letters in Christmas than in Merry, so I'd have to get some of the word Christmas over to the left of the center. Those are the kinds of things you need to think about when planning. But that's just another idea for what to do with these little sketches. And then the other thing I wanted to show you, a couple other things, is, let's see here. Oh, it's over here. I have a lot of these sketches because I do a lot of these small demos on YouTube. And I keep them in a book. That's always an issue of where do you keep all your artwork? I found this online. This is an Avery binder. It's called a junior size binder. And then I think Avery makes these plastic sleeves. These are acid free. And so you can get the plastic sleeves and then the junior binder. And I just put all of my little sketches in here. I have a bigger one too for my larger sketches, but it's just a way to catalog all your work and keep it together. So that's another little handy idea. And so probably my little snowman will go in there as well. And then the other thing that I just found out about when I was in Michaels the other day is they have these magnetic frames. So if you wanted, they do have a 5x7. I didn't buy one. This is 3x5. But if you have, say you had a 5x7 size of this, you could just slip that in and maybe give it to somebody as a gift or put it on your own refrigerator. So it's a magnet on the back And then it's got the clear sleeve, so your work is protected. And it's just a nice way to display your work. So that's another handy idea. Okay. Jean, do you have any questions?
Nope, I sure don't.
Okay.
It was a great demo. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Jean. Well, for the folks who didn't make it into the workshop, I'm sorry, but I did, record it. So I'm going to make that recording. I will contact you and make the recording available to you so you can watch it later. And, hope you can join us next time. Do make sure when you're going to use something on Zoom or watch a class on Zoom, that you have the latest updates on your device, whatever your iPad or your computer. Zoom updates their apps very frequently. And if you don't have the latest version, you run into a problem. So sorry you couldn't all join us, but feel free to email me with any questions you have when you watch the video. And thanks so much for everyone who signed up for the workshop. I'm going to go back over here.
Thank you, Stevie.
I'm going to go back to my other screen for a minute here. Okay, there we go. And I'll put it on gallery view. So there you are, Jean. I guess Krista dropped off. Okay, well, Jean, thanks a lot for attending today.
You're welcome. Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I'm sorry my other speaker did not work. I don't know why that didn't work. I had a speaker, of course, for my computer here, and then one hooked up to my camera over there, but I couldn't get that to work. So I'm hoping the sound was okay.
Yeah, it was great.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks again, Jean, and I'll see you soon.
Okay, bye.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.